Right then, quick question. Name me an English word where Q isn't followed by a U. Go on, I'll wait. You struggling? Well, you're not alone, because Q and U are so tightly bonded in English that most people think it's an actual rule, but it isn't. And the story of why they're glued together takes us back 3,000 years through Phoenician traders, Etruscan scribes, Roman soldiers, and a French invasion that changed English spelling forever. So let me explain. So here's the thing. Most people will tell you, oh, Q is always followed by a U. It's one of those schoolyard rules, isn't it? Like I before E except after C. And just like that rule, it's mostly true, but not entirely. In English, the letter Q appears almost exclusively right before the letter U. Queen, quick, quack, quill, quintessential. You get the idea. It's so consistent that when you do see a Q without U, it practically jumps off the page. Qatar, Iraq, Chi. But why is Q so dependent on U? Why is it the only letter in English that basically refuses to show up to the party without a +1? Well, to answer that, we've got to go back, way back before English even existed. We start with the Phoenicians. 3,000 years ago, they were the great traders of the Mediterranean, sailing from port to port and crucially carrying their alphabet with them. And the alphabet is the ancestor of ours. Now, the Phoenicians had 3 different letters for what we'd think of as K-type sounds. The Phoenicians were more precise. One of those letters was called copper, and copper didn't make a simple K sound. It made a consonant produced way, way back in the throat, with the back of tongue touching the uvula. It's a sound that English doesn't have, but Arabic does. And that's really important. We'll come back to that. So copper was for this deep back of the throat K sound. The other K-like letters handled different positions in the mouth. They were specific about this. Now, the Phoenician alphabet gets picked up by the Etruscans, the people who lived in what we now call Tuscany in Italy. And the Etruscans did something really interesting with it. They kept those 3 K-like letters, but they didn't need 3 different K sounds. They just had the one K sound like we do. So instead, they assigned each letter to a different vowel neighborhood. Think of it as a zoning. Gamma, the ancestor of C and G, was used before E and I. Kappa, the ancestor of K, was used before A. And copper, the ancestor of Q, was used before U and O. See where this is going? So Q was already being paired with U even back then. Not because of any spelling rule, but because of how the Etruscan language worked. Copper showed up before the back vowels U and O, because those sounds are also made further back in the mouth. It just fit. So Q and U were already hanging out together before the Romans even showed up. Now, you might be thinking, alright Craig, so Q went with U because of back vowels. Fair enough. But then why didn't it stay that way? Why don't we see Q before O anymore? Why is it only Q before U? The Romans borrowed their writing system from the Etruscans, and in early Latin, they actually used all 3, C, K, and Q, just like the Etruscans did. You can see it in early Latin inscriptions, but over time Latin got tidier. The Romans started using C for most K sounds. K nearly disappeared. And Q? Well, Q got restricted to one very specific job, representing the K sound before a W sound. So in Latin, you'd see qui, quo, qua. The Q was always followed by a U, because that U was representing the W part of the sound. And Latin locked the pattern in. Q before U, full stop. No exceptions in Latin. And then the French inherited Latin's system. Now, here's where it gets personal for English, because before 1066, before the Norman conquest, English didn't even use the letter Q. That's right, Old English spelled the KW sound with a CW. So queen was quen, quick was quick, no Q anywhere. Then Normans arrived, and they brought French spelling with them. And French, having got its alphabet from Latin, used QU for the KW sound. So the Normans looked at quen and said, no, that should be queen. Quick, but well, that's quick. Over time, English scribes adopted the French QU spelling for all those KW words. And for French words that English later borrowed, like quiche and mystique, The QU came as part of a package, even though by then the French had stopped pronouncing the W part. Quiche is just quiche. Mystique is just mystique. But the spelling stayed, so English got Q and U locked together. First from Latin, through French, through the Norman invasion, and it stuck. Right, now for the bit you've been waiting for, the exceptions, because Q without U does exist in English, and the story behind it is brilliant. There are only 3 native English words where Q appears without a U. QWERTY, named after the top row of your keyboard. It's not exactly ancient though, is it? Trank, short for tranquilizer. It's slang, but it still counts. And Kiana, a type of nylon fibre, originally a trademark. And everything else, and there are about 70 or so, is a loan word, a word borrowed from another language. And the reason they don't follow the QU rule, because they never went through the Latin-French pipeline. The biggest group comes from Arabic. In Arabic, there's a letter called kaf or quaf, which makes that deep back of the throat sound we talked about earlier. The one English doesn't have. So when Arabic words entered English, translators used Q to represent that sound, and U had nothing to do with it. Qatar, Iraq, Fakir, Kat, Kadi, none of them follow the U, because that Q isn't the same sound as our Q. It's that ancient Phoenician copper sound, still alive and well in Arabic. And then there are the Chinese loanwords. In Mandarin Pinyin, the letter Q represents a CH type sound, like Qi, pronounced Qi, and Qigong. Again, no U needed. And from Hebrew, Kabbalah, or more commonly, Kabbalah, and Kaddish from Inuktitut or Kiviot, the wool of the musk ox, which is a cracking scrabble word if you ever get the chance. So every Q without U word in English is basically an immigrant, a word that brought its own spelling rules with it and refused to play by ours. So there you have it. Q and U aren't together because of some grammar rule written in a book. They're together because 3,000 years ago, the Phoenicians made a sound at the back of their throat. The Etruscans paired it with back vowels, the Romans locked it into Latin, and the Normans forced it into English. And the exceptions? They're like guests at a party who bought their own food. Qatar, Chi, Kabbalah, words from languages that never got the memo about Q and U. It's a tiny window into how our alphabet evolved. And next time someone tells you Q is always followed by U, you can say, well, actually. So what's your favourite Q without U word? Drop it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this little journey through alphabet history, give it a like and subscribe for more. And I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.